This morning. Lord, may the meditation that we are about to have here, this meditation that you've laid on me, may it be pleasing in your sight. Lord, may we as your people learn to ask, maybe ask better, ask differently, ask in ways that maybe we haven't tried, or maybe even just begin to ask of you, our Father. Lord, help us to be people who are in that relationship with you and who exercise that relationship. In your name, amen. We are here at St.Stephanus in the middle of a series on following Jesus and some of this tension between what it means to be a believer in Jesus and sometimes just having this, you have the doctrine, you have the understanding, you have this up here and it's in your head, and what it might mean to actually put it into practice, that this following of Jesus. When we started this, we just Jesus has this command to come and follow him, but he also then took it and handed it over to his disciples. He said, it's your turn. You get to go do what I do. You get to do this. And so we talked about mercy, and having the practice of mercy for other people, how important that is, how just kind of fundamental to this command of Jesus to follow him. We talked about listening, that was last week, listening and just being able to sit and hear God. That we need to actually take that time and carve out that discipline and have it with regularity to just hear what God has to say to us. This week, as you can tell, if you pull out the little salmon-colored sheet, I don't know that there's actually pencils down here. Are there pencils down here? Why haven't I thought of that before? Well, I thought of it now. Next week, I'll figure out how to get pencils down here. Little outline for you if you happen to bring your own pen, which I'm sure was all of you this morning, right? All of you brought your own pen. We're talking about asking. And about asking God, because as Jesus has this beginning in Luke 11 with these disciples, it's all about them asking God. Asking God for whatever, asking God at all times, asking God. So we, in the West, we've taken this, we've actually changed the word asking to an entirely different word. Prayer, thank you. Somebody's got to know it. Somebody in the room. We changed it, it's prayer, but prayer is this asking of God. And so the first things that are first in this discussion of prayer, this discussion of asking and how we are going to go about following Jesus in our asking and in our prayer is desire. Desire to pray. Now, I don't know about you, but there have been points in my life where I've had no desire to pray. And very, very minimal desire. And I think it's a fairly common experience for Christians. There's times where we have a great deal of desire to pray. There's times where we have absolutely no desire to pray. There's times where we want to ask. There's times where we just don't even just feel like it. And so these disciples of Jesus, at the very beginning of Luke 11, they're expressing this desire. That Jesus, teach us how to do it. They have this desire that wells up in them. And this desire is something that can't be manufactured. And this desire is one of those things that kind of springs from the relationship that you have with God, that they had with God, that they had with Jesus as they're sitting there following him. This desire it flowed from that relationship. They wanted to pray. And Jesus, like good rabbis at the time, would have had some way of praying. Oftentimes, Jesus hadn't shared with them what to pray. Jesus had done what? He had gone off by himself to pray. So they may not necessarily have seen Jesus praying. They may not have had any pattern. And so what happens is that they're kind of building up this desire. They're building up this desire in themselves. They say, Jesus, we want to pray too. How should we do it? We want to pray. Do you have that urge? It's interesting because you talk to Christians, and most of the time Christians don't admit that they sometimes don't want to pray. That they don't have the desire. I mean, most Christians are very pious people, at least on the outside. And I mean, it's just the way it is, right? And so it's somewhat tied to the listening. If we're not listening to God, the desire to pray, the desire to ask, to be in a conversation, it's rarely there. So this is one of those things that kind of back to last week, having that discipline, that routine, listening to God, reading His Word, hearing what He has to say. This is important. It's actually essential. But there are people who are great prayers, and maybe you know them, maybe you are one of them. And they're the people who at like any event, it's like, you stub your toe, well, like, let's stop and pray. And I love these people because they have this great kind of understanding of it, like God actually cares about all of the things. But I call them the pray out loud people. And I love them. Don't ever get me wrong. I love you. If you are one of these people, I love you. But then there are other people. And there's these people who, I just don't know what to say. You might even have the desire. You've got this relationship, you've done this listening, and you've got it, but you're not quite sure, exactly how am I going to go about praying? What am I going to pray for? I was at St. Matthew's Lutheran Church last week. I had an impromptu wedding. Pastor Benke was supposed to do the wedding. His mother died. He called me up and said, "Hey, Andy, you want to do a wedding?" Sure, Bob. But while we're setting up there on Saturday, there's a woman who was videotaping, and there was sun streaming in one of the windows, and she's like, "Pastor, would you say a prayer that a cloud would go over there?" I said, "Okay." She knew what to pray for. She was putting it off onto me, which happens a lot as a pastor. People want to just kind of you pray for this because God will really listen to you. We'll really get a cloud right over that window area. Everything else can be fine. People sometimes they know what to say, but sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're not entirely sure, what do we say? So Jesus, he's praying today, this prayer that may or may not be familiar to you. We like to call it the Lord's Prayer. Perhaps you've heard of it. And in his example, it's a shortened example. There's a longer example in the Gospel of Matthew. But here it's a slightly shortened example. He does a couple of interesting things. When we're looking for what to say, is, pray to God for ourselves and others. And that's it. This is his whole pattern for prayer. Jesus, he's ready to just kind of, teach us to pray, Jesus. We've got the desire. It's welled up in us. We want to do it. We want to pray. And he's like, just pray to God. Pray for yourselves. And pray for others. I mean, if you flip to it in the bulletin, he's attached it to some very physical things. Give us this day our daily bread. Make sure that we have what we need to live. Pray, ask me for those things that I need to live. Ask me for that. Ask God your Father for the things that you are needing here on this earth. Sometimes when people pray, they don't want to pray for the things that they actually need. I grew up. I have no idea where I got this from because we get all sorts of weird spiritual messages sometimes from people, and it's just but I grew up learning to never ask for myself. You shouldn't pray for yourself. I have no idea where I got that from, but it's wrong. It's absolutely, positively dead wrong. When Jesus is offering up this example of prayer, he's saying, you pray to God. You pray for those things that are physical, that are spiritual, that are relational. That there are people that you need to pray for, that you need to ask for these people. You need to ask for yourself. You need to do this when you are about the business of asking. That's what you need to do.